Hi, I'm Rachel, and the topic I chose for my project is immigration and children. So this issue is important because thousands of children immigrate from Central America or Mexico to the United States each month. These children are fleeing the only home they know after seeing horrific sights such as gang violence and police brutality. They come to America in hopes of finding safety and happiness. Their journeys are dangerous, and they are putting their lives at risk to come to America. The relevant CRC articles include Article 3, Best Interests of the Child, Article 9, Separation from Parents, Article 10, Family Reunification, Article 19, Protection from All Forms of Violence, Article 20, Children Deprived of Family Environment, Article 22, Refugee Children, Article 25, Review of Treatment and Care, Article 27, Adequate Standard of Living, and Article 31, Leisure, Play, and Culture, as well as Article 37, Detention and Punishment. So the first article that I chose in my research was Child Migration and Transnationalized Violence in Central and North America. The study was about unaccompanied migrant children attempting to enter the United States. Most of the children were coming from Central America and Mexico. The study explains that many of the children have been unable to reach their destinations due to rising immigration and enforcement strategies. This is unfortunate because the amount of violence that the children are witnessing has not changed. There is a particularly high level of violence from El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, which you can see in the map to the right. So the two authors of this study both have done an extensive amount of research on the topic of immigration and children. Kate Swanson worked with migrant Ecuadorians for 14 years, and she also has 2.5 years of experience volunteering with unaccompanied migrant children at a nonprofit state-funded detention center in Southern California. At the detention center, she taught geography to students. These classes involved having the student map their journeys through the Americas. She also volunteered with a nonprofit legal advocacy group in California to conduct legal screening interviews with unaccompanied minors in detention. The other author, Rebecca Torres, has over 19 years of experience working in migrant origin communities in Mexico. In 2014, she volunteered with a Texan legal aid group to conduct intake interviews with Central American youth being temporarily housed at the Lackland Air Force Base emergency shelter. She has also assisted with intake interviews with women and children incarcerated in immigrant family detention in Texas who have positive, credible fear interviews, but who are held on a no bond, no release policy intended to deter other immigrants. The research from this article found that detention centers in the United States are not operating with an adequate standard of living for the immigrant children who are being detained there. For example, there has been proof of guards taking away jackets, taunting children, providing misinformation, or using deceptive tactics to obtain signatures on statements, as well as numerous microaggressions. Immigrant children have been through horrible traumatic events, and they need support from the guards at the detention centers. The children leave these centers with emotional scars from the treatment that they received during their stay. The second article I chose was Detention Centers Are Bad for Immigrant Children's Health, Study Finds. This article was based off of research from England, which proves that this is a worldwide issue. So the study was about the quality of detention centers in England, like I said. Doctors who specialize in children health analyzed 24 children who were being detained in a detention center called Yarl's Wood Immigration Removal Center. The families involved in the research were referred to the authors by the charity Bail for Immigration Detainees, which together with the Children's Society is currently campaigning to end the detention of immigrant children and families. This study found that 11 children aged between 3 and 11 years old who were seen by a clinical psychologist had developed symptoms of depression and anxiety since being detained, and that 8 children had developed severe emotional and behavioral problems. Most had sleep problems, headaches, and abdominal pain. It is worth noting that none of the children had any of these symptoms before they were sent to the detention center. The third article I chose was called Family Separation and Reunification as a Factor in the Educational Success of Immigrant Children. This study was about children who were separated from their parents when migrating from Central America or Mexico to the United States. The study mainly focused on the educational gap between immigrant children who were separated from their parents compared to immigrant children who were not separated and children who were born in the United States. The authors used a mixed method research design. The first stage was qualitative and focused on the stage of Maryland. This stage included interviews with school counselors and psychologists and 2 focus groups with parents of Latin American immigrant children who had been separated during migration. The second stage focused on data from a study called New Immigrant Survey, which is a nationally representative survey of new legal immigrants conducted by the Office of Population Research at Princeton. Using this sample in the quantitative analysis allowed them to test whether there is evidence from the survey that the insights gained from the qualitative analysis of Latin American immigrants in Maryland can be generalized to the Latin American immigration population and the broader immigration population, both Latin American and others, in the country as a whole. Specifically, they present statistical tests for the impact of family separation on 2 measures of the educational success of the children of immigrants: the education gap for 16 to 18-year-olds and high school dropout rates for 18 to 22-year-olds. In the final stage of their research, they conducted an additional focus group with Latin American immigrant parents and an anonymous online survey of teachers in Maryland schools. The research from this article showed that 1,753 children, 12.1% of children separated from parents during migration have an education gap, compared with 4.7% for those born in the United States and 4.9% for those born abroad but who migrated with their parents. There are no significant differences between the children born in the United States and those who immigrated with their parents. The 4th article I chose was the burden of deportation on children in Mexican immigrant families. The study was about the impact that the possibility of deportations has on children who are from Mexican immigrant families. The researcher goes in depth about the emotional trauma that is caused by the possibility of deportation. The author drew on interviews with 91 parents and 110 children in 80 households, including parents' stories about the impact deportations have had on their families. The author's goal was to document how an emphasis on enforcement that targets Mexicans at the level of public policy has had consequences for young children, many of whom are United States citizens who have Mexican immigrant parents. The author began with research about families in which a parent had been detained or deported. The research showed that children struggled more in households run by single mothers. These households tend to have less money, and not having a father figure seemed to have a negative effect on children's emotions, especially if they previously did have a father figure and he's no longer there. The research showed that children who had fears tied to family members being deported had increased frequency of crying, loss of appetite, sleeplessness, clingy behavior, an increase in fear and anxiety, and generic fears of law enforcement officials. The author then turned his research towards families who did not have experience with detention centers or deportation. The research showed that these families still have emotional trauma from the fear of the possibility of being deported. These families have to plan their every move around the possibility of someone finding out that they are in the United States illegally. If someone finds out and tells authorities, there is a strong possibility that at least one family member could be deported. The research showed that out of all the members of the family, it is usually fathers who get deported. Sadly, the research also showed that young children who have fears about deportation will try to stray away from their heritage and identity in order to fit in more with their peers in the United States. They do this because they believe it will decrease their chances of deportation. So one example of effort toward improving the process of immigration is a bill that was passed by United States Senator Dianne Feinstein. This bill is called the Protecting Immigrant Families and Improving Immigration Procedures Act. This bill provides lawyers for toddlers as well as more judges for all immigrants. It incorporates the Keep Families Together Act, which is a bill that stops separation of families at the border unless there is a good cause. One of the main solutions would be an increase in funding for detention centers. An increase in funding would allow immigrant children to have access to warm clothes, nutritious food, clean water, and ample space during their time in the detention center. In an ideal world, the U.S. would abolish the idea of a detention center and instead reframe the concept into a rehabilitation shelter for immigrant children who are going through the process of immigrating. Also, it would be helpful for lawmakers to consider the emotions of the children and their families when creating immigration laws. The discussion question I have created for anyone watching this is, imagine you're a lawmaker. What law or laws would you create to help children who are immigrants? And here is the bibliography. Thank you.